You want to know how you make money off grid? You have to ask yourself a couple questions. How do I make money on grid? What if you just disconnected your utilities where you're at? Do you need another different job? I don't know what people think we do out here that is any different from what you do in town, other than live self-sufficiently and for a lot less. I'm going to assume that you plan on moving away from where you're at now to live off grid. Because if you really want to live off grid, all you have to do is cut utilities off. You're off grid. No power, no electric, no water, no gas, whatever. You're off grid. You can live in a subdivision of 500 homes, or you can live in an apartment complex. You're not connected to utilities. You're off grid. But I get it. Some of y'all want to know, how am I supposed to support myself or my family when I live off grid? I mean, you can live here or you can live here. It doesn't really matter. People who live off grid have regular jobs just like you do. Say you do move off grid to a very rural area and you're not accustomed to that. What do you do to make money off grid? It would be the same if you moved to a small town. You would go look for a job, or you would have skills or abilities that you could offer services to other people. And if you don't have skills to get a decent part-time job or a full-time job off grid, go get those skills before you move off grid. Nearly every community has a community college within easy driving distance. Night classes, dirt cheap. Welding, carpentry, just about anything you want to from there. Then you have the skills. But you gotta have the want to. As the old saying goes, those who fail to plan to fail. Squirrel rut is in full force. The skills are out there for you to get if you don't have them. There should be no problem for you to find a job, part-time, full-time, in a small community. But you want to research this and do this before you move off grid. Don't move off, like I said, don't move off grid with all your debt and no job and go, well, I'm moving off grid. I'm dying out here. Now, there are those who claim that living off grid is so much more expensive than living on grid. Those kind of people don't get it. The whole point most people move off grid is to be self-sufficient and to live more simpler life. Start doing that. You need to get rid of your bills. You don't need a new car every 2 years. Limit your expenses. I would say if you're in town and you have a good job, start cutting your expenses out. Do not move off grid and have no savings and have a pile of debt, because it will follow you there. You need to have a plan in place before you move off grid. If you have a good job, start paying off your debt. Get rid of the junk. Well, you don't understand. I'm going to give out my kids. No, your kids got enough junk already, unless you're enabling them. Get rid of the junk. But you don't understand. I'm going to wait till my kids. I'm going to wait till my kids get old enough and move out until I move off grid. Most people say that, never move off grid, because sometimes their kids never move out. Your kids will make new friends. After they graduate, as the years go on, they'll have all new friends and not the ones from high school. Very few of them will ever have the same friends they have in high school. I have one friend from high school. Cut your debt. Moving off grid should be a heck of a lot cheaper than living on grid. Don't even start with me about, oh, land is so expensive around my place. You cannot find it. Yes, you can. If you can't, you're not looking hard enough. Now, you may have to commute to work. Most small towns, even today in 2025, have a diner. They need waitresses. They have a feed store, lumberyard where they need work. There's all types of work still available in rural America. It may not be the type of work you want to do, but if it helps you get place paid off, you sacrifice. You make those sacrifices. The trick to living off grid is to limit your expenses. The truth of the fact is, the fewer expenses you have, the less money you have to make. So while you may have to make $20, $25, $30 an hour in town. If you move off grid and cut your expenses, you can probably get by with 10, 12 bucks, who knows? Or you can be like me, just work whenever you want to and when you need to, because I have very few expenses now. And unfortunately for me, I have a no expense now. With no land payment, no cabin payment, I can afford this. How much are you paying a month in utilities? Imagine if you did not have any of those utility bills. That's the thing about living off grid. Cut the expenses, limit the expenses, and you don't have to make near as much money as you did when you lived in town with your rent or your mortgage, utilities, electric, gas, water, trash. You have none of that. So there's no need to make a whole lot of money. Go into town, go get a simple job, part-time job. Should be enough to pay your expenses. Otherwise, you'll need a full-time job. You have to make the determined, disciplined decision that you want out of the rat race. I do not need a new car every 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. I can buy an old beater for $2,500 that will run forever and a day. I don't need a $3,000 a month apartment, $2,000 a month utility bills. There was somebody the other day on the forum saying, oh, they spent $1,500 in 3 months on propane. Really? Something's wrong with that. You don't need to spend that living off grid. Even the chickadee agrees. How much money do you need to survive if you have no bills? If you have no mortgage, no car payments, no insurance payments on those cars and those mortgage, yes, you can live off grid in a cabin or shabin or whatever without insurance. I know, just totally blows your mind, right? How do we make money off grid? The same way you make money on grid. Plan ahead. Don't move off grid and then go, well, how do I pay all my bills? I'm going to go broke. I got to find a job. You know, it's best if you pay them off before you move off grid. You should move out with minimal expenses out there. Maybe your land, cabin payment, whatever, should be a fraction of what it was in town. Get that paid off. You don't have to work as much. You can go fishing, go traveling. You can do all these things you want to. But can you do it? You know, like some of you do, 5,000 square foot. I got to have 5,000 square foot house. I got to have tractors and backhoes. And I guess you start a YouTube channel and have your wife or girlfriend in bikini on thumbnails to do it. I don't know.